Hello again and welcome back to the strategy course. We're going to be discussing now is resources and capabilities, sources of competitive advantage, basically going inside the company and try to understand how a company is able to create value. And we're going to be answering two questions. What are these? What are resources, capabilities? How do they basically drive value creation and how do we identify them? Partly so that we go deeper and try to not only discuss it more in general, but specifically a couple of frameworks that help us understand this issue better. So let's start. What are resources? Resources and capabilities, something very simple, sources of competitive advantage, value creation. We can take it in both sides. What are resources? The first thing, well, assets tied to the company, assets that belong to the company, tied semi-permanently to the firm. This seems to be a very particular definition. It's a clarification of the difference between resources and inputs. Inputs are things that I can buy outside the market, I can bring to the company. They are going to be part of the activities, what I do within the company, but it's not something that I control. It's not something that I can exclude others from having. It's not something that is exclusive. Resources, assets I have within the company, I control them, and hopefully they are going to be different, hopefully better than those of competitors, and eventually could become a source of advantage. Underlying this is a theory, the resource-based view, introduced in the 1980s, especially in the early 1990s, that drives this discussion of differences among companies, and it goes, if you want, complementing the other theory that basically tries to also explain sources of advantage, which is positioning. And positioning, to some extent, is the driver behind the story of capabilities. Capabilities, the ability to use resources in the activities of the company. I not only have resources, I may be able to drive processes, practices that enable me to use those resources better than others, hopefully. So we have these discussions of what the company has and what the company does, resources and capabilities, assets tied to the company, and how I use those assets within the company. Of course, the question is always, which one is better? Very simple answer, both. In the sense that a company can create value by using both. A company can have a competitive advantage through both sides. So it's not one or the other. It's not one is better than the other. Both of them can help companies create value and do it better than its competitors. So let's go slightly deeper into this discussion. And now we're getting into the classification of resources. So companies have lots of assets and they do lots of, they are able to use those assets in many different ways. Which one is going to provide an advantage, which one is not. Before that, brief clarification. Not all resources, even though in general, if you talk about resources, kind of, oh, that of course that has to be good. There is an association with resources being good, but in strategic management, that's not the case. You can have resources, conditions of those resources or capabilities in comparison to those of other competitors and in connection to the needs of customers that enable us to classify them into advantageous. They are going to be a source of value creation. They are going to enable the company to achieve an advantage. Some of them are going to be neutral. They are similar to what other competitors have. It's not going to be different. It's not going to be unique. Yes, they can help the company operate, but it's not going to go beyond what others have. We call them neutral in terms of value creation, other advantage. And then disadvantageous. In some occasions, some resources or maybe the capabilities create tensions, create problems, things are not working well. And yes, we may be able to generate value in one way, but we are actually destroying value in other sides of the company. The result of this is that the ultimate sources of advantage of a company in general, are going to be an outcome of all of this. I'm running a company, some of my resources or my capabilities may be superior to those of competitors. Others may be similar to those of competitors. Others might undermine it. At the end, value creation, especially competitive advantage and the associated profitability is going to be the outcome of whether I'm able to create value and basically match my competitors and not basically undermine the value created on one side with disadvantages on the other. It seems relatively, if you want, abstract, but we can go deeper into trying to identify under which conditions this happens. So how do we do this? Trying to understand which ones are the resources capabilities that we are going to call strategic, i.e. sources of advantage. We have a framework, VRISA framework. Valuable, rare, difficult, immediate, substitute, appropriable. 5 different conditions. And let's just start with the first one. Valuable is this resource capability helping the company create value for customers. If this is the case, we call that a resource capability a source of a value creation for the company. The next question, of course, is yes, and is this rare? Is this the only company that controls it, or the quality of the resource capability in this company is better than that of competitors? Valuable, rare. Next to characteristics, difficult to imitate. Can other competitors basically replicate, do the same thing that I'm doing? Can they get the same resources? Can they run the same processes as I am doing it? And the fourth one is, well, they cannot do it the same way, but they can find alternative ways to achieve the same outcome, and in not quite a replication, but in an alternative way of doing it. And then finally, appropriable. Can of the value that I have created, can I capture some of that value that has been generated by this resource capability? If this is the case, one resource capability, and this is at the level of resources or capabilities, identify some of them. Is it going to be valuable, rare, difficult to meet, substitute, and appropriable? They potentially are going to be source of advantage. Now, let's see what happens with combinations of these different dimensions. So what happens with a resource that is valuable and rare? That's a source of competitive advantage. It's the definition of competitive advantage. I'm better than my competitors at satisfying customers. So this is basically the 2 dimensions. If it is not valuable, it's not really contributing to value creation, it might be relevant. If it is problematic, it's destroying value, it's going to be a source of disadvantage, or it's basically the story of neutrality or disadvantage, competitive parity, competitive disadvantage, or irrelevance. Well, that's nice, but I can have a source of advantage. This is not going to be forever. Why? Because competitors are trying to basically outcompete each other. And that's where the next level comes. What happens when a resource is valuable, rare, difficult to imitate, and substitute? That's going to be a source of sustainable competitive advantage over a period of time, hopefully longer. I'm not only able to create value for customers better than my competitors, but my competitors cannot do it, cannot imitate, or cannot substitute, and therefore I'm going to be able to generate that value and hopefully capture some of it. My profitability might be there. So then that's great, but profitability doesn't have to be tied to only competition. I should be able to incorporate it and capture it, and this is a story of can I appropriate some of this? If a resource is valuable, rare, difficult to substitute, and appropriable, basically I control that profitability. It's something that is going to enable me to capture some of that value that we discussed before. With this, these are the conditions. How do we apply this? How do we go deeper into it? And there's another tool, the value chain. And this is just an explanation of how activities are created. Within the activities, we are going to locate resources and capabilities to try to identify which one of them are going to be the source of advantage. What do we do with this? It's an input-output process. Primary activities, how things come into the company, I do something with them, I move them out, then I try to market them, and then eventually there is a relationship with the customers. Inbound logistics, I'm able, in terms of activities, to bring things into the company might be better than others there. How I purchase and bring things in, how I basically obtain the information, work with my suppliers. I might have then advantages in the operations. I'm able to do things better than others in terms of putting components together or developing new ones and basically running a very smooth and sophisticated production process. I can then also have advantages moving things out, this distribution part, as customers want it. They are going to get it delivered. I'm basically fitting my production process with their needs. And then there is a story of marketing and sales. I create a brand I connect better with my customers. I can do the standard, if you want, promotion and advertising, so that they basically continue coming to me because they think I am a better company, and then I can provide a service. How I support the needs of my customers, how I basically deal with the things that they might not be happy. Input, output, this is value creation, direct value chain. On top or below. In the case of this particular figure, it has been on top, but it can be below. It's basically what we call secondary activities. They support all the different stages of value creation in primary activities. Firm infrastructure, general management, coordination structure, finance, accounting, the general, if you want, functions, human resource management, how well I manage my individuals, workers in the company, how do I find them, incorporate them in the company, train them, promote them, create, if you want, a sense of belonging, corporate culture. How do I incentivize them to do things well? Technology development, if you want, R&D traditions of people in white coats in labs, or something not as, if you want, a standard in which I get product development, design, market research, understanding how things can be improved, innovation. Then procurement, how do I am able to negotiate with others? Can I get discounts, or can I get better service from my suppliers, so that distributors, so that basically I can have a better production process. All of these things, any of them can be a source of advantage. The idea is, in comparison to others, can we identify those areas, those resources and capabilities within each of the activities that are going to be VRISA, valuable and rare. They're going to be creating a source of advantage, difficult to imitate and substitute by competitors, and I can capture some of that value. So with this is a story. It's relatively abstract, but I think it's useful to understand the story of resources and capabilities as sources of advantage, the assets I have, and then how I use those assets. Not all of them are going to be a source of advantage. In reality, in many cases, yes, a few of them. The idea, if you want, or the logic behind understanding these is which ones are a source of advantage, which ones are sources of parity, so similar to other competitors, which ones might be creating disadvantages. And in many cases, basically, the decision is, how do I continue improving my sources of advantage? Maybe, depending on which competitors, I can basically go beyond parity and make them into something that provides me an advantage. And in other cases, especially, and this is if you want a solution to problems, how can I prevent sources of disadvantage within the company to undermine all the value created with the other sources? These are the two frameworks, VRISA, and then the activity, the value chain, so that we can basically start separating and identifying, in comparison to other competitors, for particular customers, how a company creates value for them and eventually achieves a competitive advantage. That's all. Look forward to seeing you again. Bye-bye.